So my wife wants my permission to let her sleep with someone she knows from work. She says she will let me sleep with any woman of my choice if I let her do so. So what do I do? So we have been married for a little over a year. It's been a pretty happy marriage. We've had small arguments, as any couple would, but nothing crazy. We have never talked about an open marriage or sharing each other before. The other day, my wife comes up to me and asks me if I would sleep with another woman if I had a free pass. I told her no. She was who I wanted and more than enough for me. She rolled her eyes and looked a little annoyed with what I said, which surprised me because I thought that would make her happy. She said, "Really? Not with anyone? That's a load of crap." I stood by my answer. She then admitted that she would. I asked who. After a bit of coaxing, she finally told me that there is a colleague at work that she would hook up with. I asked if she had talked to him about it, or if they had any type of sexual relationship. She denied it. The conversation ended shortly after that. I was a little suspicious, so I started to look through her phone. In her photos, I noticed many nudes that had never been sent to me. I talked to her about this, and she admitted that she had been sending them to the guy at work, and that they had been sexting. Since this was now out in the open, she asked my permission for her to meet up with him. She said that the conditions were that they would meet up less than 5 times, and it would only be sexual and not emotional or anything like that, and that I could have a free pass too. I was shocked that she would do this to me. She had never been overly flirty with other guys or talked to them in front of me before. I thought she was shy around most people and timid. She just admitted that she finds him so hot and attractive and knows that she would never have the opportunity to meet up with someone like this again. She also mentioned how he had a bigger package than any she had ever seen. She said that his personality is awful and it would never be anything more than sex, that this is just something that she would regret if she didn't do it. She told me that she loved me in bed, but this was just something new that she wanted to experience and that she would never do it again. As I told her in the beginning, I only want her and don't want a free pass. She keeps insisting, saying that she would feel really bad if she does it and I don't take advantage of my free pass. She even offered to talk to some of her friends to see if they would be interested or try to find someone elsewhere. I told her I didn't know what to say and that I'd think about it. So what do I do? Do I try to go along with this? Do I break it off? We do truly love each other, so that would be so hard. I know she loves me a lot. Update 1. I decided to have an important discussion with my wife last night about this situation and about the future of our marriage. I started off by telling her that I am not going to be using the free pass that she has given me. She huffed at this and was still pretty upset. I questioned her why she would be so upset that I am not sleeping with someone else. She explained to me that it was immature and petty, and that all of her guy friends and people that she knows would jump at the opportunity. She explained how she thought it was just for me to prove a point that I'm better than her and don't need other women to satisfy me. I explained that I'm not taking it because I truly love her. I love her and I love having sex with her. Even if I didn't love the sex, I wouldn't be looking elsewhere for it. She said that it's not fair for her not to be able to do this since I slept with many more women than she did men before we got married. She explained that it is only fair that she gets to do this since I have gotten to experience so much more. I questioned her about the guy from work. I wanted to figure out how she knew so much about him and his cock. After questioning her for over 30 minutes, she admitted that she has felt him up, but that they have not went further than that yet. I asked if they had already planned a time to meet up and she said yes. They were going to try to this weekend, pending our discussion. She said that since I am not taking my free pass, that she will truly feel awful about it, but still does not want to cancel. I told her that I at least want to meet the guy beforehand. She agreed to bring him over at some point before they meet up. After noticing that I'm visibly upset, she tried to cheer me up by telling me that I might really enjoy this and that we are just trying something new. She brought up that we have done some cuckold roleplay before, and this may be something that I really like. She tells me that she will video it for me in case it is something I like. I tell her that it is fine and that she could be right, but I'll only know after the fact. I explain that if I am only upset after and not turned on at all, that I will not be able to approve her meeting this guy again. She says that she understands. We had some great sex last night, and she has been extra clingy since she noticed how upset I've been. I even woke up to a full-cooked breakfast and a massage this morning. I can tell that she does truly care for me and wants me to be happy. So basically, we have an arrangement now that if I don't like how it goes one time after they meet up, that they will break it off. If she is unable to break it off with him, then I will seek counseling and then probably prepare for the worst. Update 2. My wife finally met up with her coworker last weekend. I won't get into all the details, but they had lots of sex and did a lot of things. Afterwards, I spoke to my wife about boundaries. She got upset pretty quickly and said that I didn't have a right to tell 2 other adults what they can or can't do in the bedroom. Even after I was feeling better about letting her sleep with him and be with him, this left a bad taste in my mouth. Later, I asked her if I could be with them the next time they meet. She seemed okay with it, but said she would ask her coworker friend. He said that he didn't feel comfortable with it, so I couldn't be there. Is it normal not to set boundaries in an open or cuckold relationship? Update 3. This past weekend is what really did it in for me. She left Saturday morning without showing a care for me in the world. She made me take pictures of her to send to the guy before she left. She left without even giving me a kiss. At first she explained that she would be back that night. Nighttime came, and she was nowhere to be seen. The next morning, she tells me that she decided to stay the night with him, without even asking or telling me first. That's not even the worst part. That night, he invited over one of his friends, and she messed around with both of them. She didn't even care to ask me about that first. When she arrived back at the house, she told me all this stuff. I started to get visibly upset. She laughed and said get over it, and that it's not manly. I couldn't put up with it anymore. She obviously no longer cared for me. No spouse would say anything like this to their partner if they actually cared for them. I was just shocked. At no point in our marriage until the other week did I notice any signs that she would be this way. She had always been the most loving, caring girl that I had ever met. It's like a flip switched when she met that guy and changed into a different person. I didn't know one person could change someone that much and that quickly. I'm 99% sure that she's going to end up dating this guy. She has spent the past few weekends together with him and even talks about him around me. The other night, I told her that if she doesn't at least put in boundaries, that I will leave. She said, okay, and laughed a lot. Without saying another word, I packed up some bags and booked a room at the nearest hotel. I've told my brother about this situation, and he has offered for me to come stay with him for a little while. I ended up going to his place for the night. She sent me some texts that night and the next day. She was acting upset and confused as to why I left, and she was saying that she missed me. The next day, I knew we needed to go back to my house so that there wouldn't be as much of a chance that I would lose it. My brother went with me to help. When we got there, my wife was trying to talk to me. I had nothing to say to her at the moment, so I just ignored her and tried to get past her. She was grabbing me and trying to hold me. My brother helped to get her off of me and told her that he would call the cops if she didn't stop messing with me. She ended up leaving. I haven't heard from her since. This situation has destroyed me. I tried to let her do this to make her happy. I didn't want it in the first place, but I tried to make myself like it to please her. I never saw any signs or anything that she would be this manipulative and this bad of a person before we got married. I don't know where any of this came from. She was the most amazing, thoughtful person ever. Now that this has happened, my whole outlook on life and relationships is different. So what advice would you guys give me? Whether it's next steps in dealing with my current wife or in the future when I'm back in the dating game. How do I tell our families and friends? How do I speak to my wife about it? I'm really having a tough time handling all of this. Update 4. I had left her last week and went to stay with my brother. After talking to him and reading several comments, I figured it would be a good idea to try to go back and stay at my house, to try to make sure that I wouldn't lose it when we got divorced. The next day, I decided to go back there. My brother was going with me too. When we got there, my wife was trying to talk to me and grab me. I ignored her the whole time and pretty much acted like she didn't exist. She got pretty rough and was beating on my chest. I finally pushed away. My brother told her that if she doesn't leave me alone, that he would call the cops. She finally left after that. I didn't hear from her the rest of that night. The next day I did receive a picture of her and a coworker. It was a normal selfie of them together. There was no text with it. I showed it to my brother, and he said that she must be sick in the head to do that. I finally met up with a divorce attorney for an initial meeting and consultation. It went well, and he told me things that I needed to know in preparation for the divorce. He said that the pictures and videos I have of them will be helpful evidence. The only problem with the situation is that she may prove that I agreed to everything, even though there was manipulation involved. My brother and I went over to my parents to sit down and talk with them about what was going on. They were shocked to hear this about her and almost didn't believe it at first. My brother had my back and confirmed with them that everything I said was true. They wanted to talk to her, but I told them not to. The next step was telling her parents. I debated about this for a while, as I did not know if it was my place to do so. After a while, I finally decided that it would be best to. I know that if I didn't tell them first, she would probably tell them awful lies about me. I set up a time to meet them at their place. I went over alone. After a while of just sitting there and having small talk, I finally built up the courage to tell them what was going on. The looks on their faces were unbelievable. They looked disgusted. They had never seen this side of their daughter. I was surprised that they didn't put any of the blame on me. They understood that I loved her and wanted to do whatever I could to make her happy. They even hugged me before I left. We were all in tears. They knew that divorcing her was the last thing I wanted to do, but understood that I had to at this point. This weekend, I spent most of my time talking to my attorney and chilling with my brother at the house. Saturday night came, and I received a text from my wife stating that she was coming over. I texted her back and told her that she wasn't welcome here right now. She didn't listen, and about 20 minutes later, she showed up. I felt like I didn't really have a choice at this point, but to talk to her. She started off by saying that she had been talking to her parents, and they were very angry with her, and that they mentioned us getting a divorce. I was hoping that they wouldn't tell her that, as I had not even broke the news of that to her yet. I wasn't even planning on telling her in person. I had planned for it all to be through the lawyer. She told me that what I did was childish and that I must not be a real man because I talked to her parents before her. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable talking to her anymore as she had manipulated me so much already, and that I talked to her parents first because I knew if I didn't, that she would lie to them and accuse everything on me. She then kept asking me if it was true that I was really filing for a divorce. I confirmed that I was. She started sobbing uncontrollably and didn't really say anything for a good 15 minutes. She finally stopped and was asking me why I was doing this and why I didn't give her a heads up. I explained that throughout all of this, she has been super manipulative and has treated me like I don't exist. I have been so humiliated by her and the coworker. She promised that she would stop if I took her back. I told her that I couldn't. She finally left after that. The next morning, I woke up to a lot of texts and missed calls from her. They are mostly long messages and voicemails of her apologizing and explaining how much she loves me. It really hurt to listen to them because I was reminded of our past and how much I loved her. I was crying like crazy at this point, and it took everything in me not to respond back to her. I just kept reminding myself what she has done to me the last few weeks. Since she left that night, I've gotten many texts from her friends telling me that I need to take her back. They were cussing me out and telling me how wrong it was of me to go to her parents. They said that now, they are the only people she has. This has all been so crazy. I can't believe how emotional the past few days have been. I can't believe that even her parents are on my side. I do feel bad for telling them first and making them turn on her, but I'm glad they're on my side. Her friends continue to attack me and send threats. I've not heard from my wife ever since she sent the long texts and messages. I'm guessing that she is either staying with the coworker or her friends, as her parents are against her at the moment. I'm surprised I was able to stand up this strongly against her. I hope to continue to be able to do so. I think that this weekend was big for me. It showed me that I do have the strength to stand up to her and leave her. Thanks everyone for your concern and all of the kind messages. I will do my best to try and still update everyone on anything major that happens. I think my wife is cheating on me with her cousin. This situation happened about 2 weeks ago, and I've gone from fully trusting her to deeply doubting her. My wife and I met when I was 19, and we fell in love quite quickly. She had a 4-month-old child from a previous relationship. That father hasn't been in the picture since I've known her. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a father. But I have a genetic disorder I don't wish to pass on, so adoption was just great with me. Anyhow, we've been just like your normal family every day since then. We got married last year. She was never super close with her family, but she did have a pair of cousins she was always kind of close to, and I had lots of fun getting to know them, and they seemed like decent people. She did mention that one of them, Max we'll call him, had, when they were like 12 and 13, tried to kiss her, but she ran off. I asked her if she ever told anyone, and she said she talked it up to him being a stupid kid. We see him on Christmas every year, and he seems like a normal dude. I actually liked him, as her family has a bunch of stuffed shirts, and he's down to earth. Recently, they've reconnected and gone to a few family functions. We own one car, and since I needed it for work, he picked her up and drove her to these things. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary about this. They are cousins after all. Her behavior really didn't make any obvious changes. However, randomly, as I was watching TV one night, she came in and mentioned that I had friended a girl from my place of work. I accepted a friend request. We're a pretty open couple, and things don't usually offend us. For instance, She'll remark on an attractive guy and make some sort of lewd remark, and I think nothing of telling her this woman was the new Office. She didn't accuse me of cheating, but it felt like she was about to, which has never happened before. The reason I mention this is because I've read cheaters accuse their partner as a projection or something. Anyway, these family outings were legit. The whole family posts pics on them on Facebook, and the wife sends pics from the outings. There were 2 of these events, and each time the wife came home and was like a robot. Sex seemed normal, if not quieter than usual, but as she suffers from depression, she often gets cold every so often, and when I asked her if she was doing alright, she chalked it up to that. Well, 2 weeks ago, she left for work, and as it was my day off, I puttered around the house, dropped the boy off at school, and came home to check my mail. On Facebook, I saw that I had a message from her cousin. He and I recently discussed going out to see a farm team baseball game, and I thought he was getting back to me. The message reads, "I'd like to see you on your knees." I was confused as hell until I realized that my wife was still signed in, and it was her he was talking to. I wanted to kill him. I instantly rushed and read through their chat log, and it's filled with him creeping on her, and while she is saying things like, "But I'm married," and "No, I'm married," these read like very thin no's, like she is saying no because she has to, not because she wants to. I'm disgusted and absolutely floored about it. But since none of them mention anything happening yet, and she is denying him albeit kindly, I can't exactly say she's cheating. Well, when she gets home and our son is put to bed, I confront her over the situation. She instantly breaks down into hysterics and tears, saying things like, "I didn't do anything. I didn't know how to tell you. I was just hoping he stopped." Now, she and I both suffered childhood sexual abuse from family friends. We've both went to years of therapy for it, and for that reason, we have very good communication skills when it comes to comfort and boundaries and how to express ourselves about unwanted advances. I love her, and I wanted to believe her, and that he was just being a creep, but the way she didn't tell me and acted, seemingly normal, leads me to believe something else was going on. I told her that I believed her, and asked her if I could message him to tell him to back off and how disgusted I am that they are cousins, or if she would prefer to tell him and handle it herself. She first expressed that she would tell him that I knew and not to call her, but her resolve cracked as she was confident this would just stop. I was furious about that, but didn't express it, and told her that knowing she was going to, I was going to give him a piece of my mind. I was going to give him a piece of mind. This is my wife, and if she's being harassed, I will end it. And if she's not being harassed, she's cheating on me, so I messaged him. He saw it, but made no reply. The wife says I should have let her handle the situation, and I told her there was no way I was going to keep quiet in the face of this. She seemed to understand and expressed in the end that I was probably right to confront him because she didn't know how. Everything seemed to return to normal. But 3 days later, I came home and she's crying. I asked her what's going wrong, and she said, "It's Max. You should have let me handle it. I messaged him yesterday, and he won't talk to me." We had the conversation again about me not sitting idly by when somebody is harassing my wife. She gave me a look. It wasn't much, and it was only for a second, but it gave me the impression that she didn't consider it harassment. We ended the discussion in agreement that I handled it how any man would handle it. 2 days later, I'm coming to bed late, like 2 a.m. as I was finishing up some work. I hear her on the phone with somebody kind of chuckling. This is not normal. Told me it was her mom and had something to do with our kid's birthday, which I didn't buy. But at this point, I've begun playing stupid so I can observe the situation from a place where she feels comfortable. The next day, she is crying again, and at this point, I've really had it. She's been unstable for 2 weeks now. When I ask her if this is about Max again, she says she tried to call and apologize for not handling the situation herself, and that he still isn't talking to her. I admit it, I snapped. I told her that either he was abusing her or she was cheating on me, and I caught them. On the couch tonight, obviously. I wanted to believe her, but I'm not a moron. I'm essentially laying here with my finger on the button, waiting for some solid truth, because if this is what it's feeling more and more like, I'm about to go 95,000 Megatron nuclear on both of them. Sorry for the length. I just don't know what I can do from here on out. Edit. Thanks for all the input. She goes to work in 6 hours. I will apologize for my outburst and ask her to sit down with me and talk tonight. It's Sunday, and our son typically stays the night with my parents every other Sunday. I'm not proud of it, but I feel it's in my best interest to do a snooping. If I find nothing, we will discuss what happened when it started, what I can do to help her, and what we ought to do moving forward. I love her, and the idea that she is being harassed by somebody who is supposed to love her breaks my heart. However, if I do find something sordid, or learn that she was complicit in any way, I am done with the relationship that instant. I don't believe in marriage counseling in instances of infidelity, and even if I did, incest. There is no way I could look at her the same again. We'll update. Update. So I didn't sleep at all last night, and when she woke up, I made breakfast. I told her I shouldn't have blown up, and that we should probably sit down tonight and talk about things. She agreed, like she wasn't even upset to begin with, and said she knew she had probably been acting badly. I told her that the sort of harassment she was dealing with was infinitely more difficult because he is a member of the family. She just seemed to agree with me. I wasn't going to snoop, but so many people in here told me I ought to, and not wanting to be accused of not taking the advice I asked for, I decided to go through with it and check her emails. With the way she was acting this morning, I had fewer reasons to be suspicious, but at this point, what the heck? And did just that. The level of disgust, hatred, and anger I feel cannot be expressed right, and there will be a divorce. There was one email entitled, Yummy, and upon opening it, I found a picture of her cousin with semen on his face. The back and forths are him describing to her his encounters with random gay men. They make reference to past sexual encounters they've had together, complete with one picture of a strap-on dildo captioned, I still have our old friend. Then I read some absolutely disgusting filth talk between them, where she is behaving in a very dominating way and insulting his penis size. Looking at the dates, I realized that this was from a year ago. As I continue to read, I'm able to figure out, at least from how it reads, that they used to hook up frequently but stopped after we got married. We were together for several years before we got married. Later, she starts using the I'm married excuse, but it's reading like that's just a kink of his, to be told he can't touch her anymore, which he probably does. I'm raising her kid, and she does this to me? I've wasted the last 6 years changing my work schedule and not taking better paying jobs because I need hours where I'm able to watch him. I went outside and sat on the front porch, called my brother over, and after explaining to him the entire situation, asked him to take my gun from me for the time being. I'm not a violent person, I never have been, but in the state I'm in now, I'm fluctuating between wanting to kill him and wanting to kill myself. I'm not going to, but I feel like I'm headed for a breakdown and I can't trust I'll behave rationally. After this, I'm packing up my clothes and checking into a hotel. These conversations have all been printed. I've sent copies to myself, and when I have time, I'm digging for more dirt. Bought a pack of cigarettes. Stopped smoking 4 years ago. And joy I have to make an appointment at some STD clinic because according to these vile back and forths, a part of his thing is having unprotected sex with these men. My soon-to-be ex-wife has a divorce, and as such, I've never once in all these years worn protection with her. So now I apparently have months of biting my nails to look forward to, as I understand AIDS tests take months. I know his work schedule roughly because I used to work for the same company he does. So maybe before checking in and composing myself, I'm just going to drive down to see his wife's evidence in hand. There's no fixing this. There's no therapy. No hope. Nothing positive, and I don't care to even entertain an apology. I'm divorcing the whore, and she will get nothing. I hate life right now. I don't feel depressed or sad. I haven't cried. I just have this hot ball of rage in my chest that the cigarettes only briefly cool. I can't be near her or him. I know I said I'm not violent, but man, I really want to beat the piss out of both of them. My girlfriend of 2 years cheated, and I didn't find out till she was engaged 3 months later, but I got the last laugh. I met my ex when we were both attending college. I was 24 and she was 22. I had never really dated much before her. I had just gotten out of a toxic year-long relationship that didn't work, but we were amicable. The other girl was seriously depressed. I loved her, but she was so overwhelmingly depressed I could do anything. I consider myself an empath, and her depression would seep into me. So I broke it off. My ex was the one that sort of approached me as we were both living in the same apartment complex. I had gone out of my way to help her a few times, but she asked for a ride, and that was what sparked the friendship, then relationship. I would spend hours with her, whether she was at home or closing at the sandwich store she worked at. She was taking time off from school due to depression and a failed engagement from a year or so ago. Though as far as I know, she never finished school, period, and transferred twice to other universities. We partially bonded over her story about how she had been betrayed and cheated on by her ex, though I now question how much of the story was true. We became inseparable. She introduced me to her parents only after 2 months of friends with benefits. After a few months, I wanted her to become my girlfriend since I simply had no interest in other girls aside from her. She declined, saying she wasn't ready because of her past engagement. This should have been my first red flag, but I, like the idiot I was, gave her a pass. We continued dating exclusively. She didn't date anyone else and neither did I. A month later, I brought up our status again because if we were exclusive anyway, why not just admit what we were? She continued to fight it. There were times during our relationship where things seemed perfect. She seemed to like everything I liked. She had similar goals, and we just seemed like a perfect match. But sometimes, I would notice backhand remarks about me. She would sometimes compare me and talk about her different exes. We would sometimes fight over such a small thing, and I would try to de-escalate it, but she wouldn't have it. She would run out of my apartment, and at times, I would chase after her. She would become angry that I did that, saying I should give her space. So the next time she did that, I wouldn't chase after her, and then she would accuse me of not caring about her. She also began to gaslight me about certain things I remembered her saying, though at the time I didn't know what gaslighting was. But like a sucker in love, I went with it. Many of my friends would remark to me when I spoke about her that I could do better, that she didn't treat me right, but I just brushed it off. People, listen to your friends. They usually are looking out for you. After dating for a year, I would still bring up becoming official boyfriend-girlfriend, but she was still resilient. She would still say she wasn't ready, but I was the best guy she had ever dated. All of her friends knew we were dating, but to be honest, I didn't like them. She would invite me to hang out with them, but they were very cliche-ish, and I'm not like that. Also, they had a cat, and I'm allergic, so I would use that as an excuse. As time went on, we would go on dates. She would call me every night, and we would stay on the phone all night until one of us woke up the next day. She said due to her depression, I was comforting and helped her sleep. We continued to have problems at times where she would even get physical. She slapped me hard on 2 occasions. Both were not because we were fighting, but because she thought it would be funny. Each time I told her that was disrespectful, and that since I would never do that to her, I expected the same in return. During one of our fights, she once stated, "My roommate knows all the guys that would be willing to be non-committal makeouts in the complex, so I don't really need you." But finally, after a little over a year of dating, she gave in and decided to be girlfriend-boyfriend. But I noticed that she seemed to keep it secret to everyone except her family. I thought it was weird, but seeing as I had gotten what I wanted, I paid no attention to it. I'm going to butt this in here and say there were times I wasn't a perfect significant other. I also deal with depression, and the stress of work, school, family, and her became too much at times. I lashed out, but never hurt her. I would point out the things she had done that were hurtful to me. We broke up several times. Sometimes I would break up with her, and sometimes she would break up with me. But each time, one of us would relent and come back to the other. One time, I was a bit manipulative and self-harmed to show her how much it was hurting me. She had also self-harmed and expressed being suicidal during us dating, and to be totally honest, I got the idea from her. I was truly in love with her. She told me she was with me. We discussed marriage, children, where we would live, etc. During this time, she moved twice. First to an apartment down the street, and then to her parents' house, about an hour north. During when she lived in the apartment down street, she threw a party. When it was over, none of her friends stayed to help clean, just me. She told me this was proof I'd be a good husband. After her move to her parents, I would visit her almost weekly, but I began to notice a bit of distance at times. She was replying slower and slower to my texts and calls, but if she called or texted me, she expected a quick reply. Whenever she needed me, I would come to her, even at 1 a.m. in the morning when I had work and school the next day. After a couple of months, I began to suggest getting engaged, but then she started to do the same thing she had done with being girlfriend-boyfriend. She would use her depression from her past relationship as an excuse. And then she asked if we could go back to casually dating. This was the dumbest thing I had ever done. I said it was okay. I thought this would show her that I was the guy for her. Over the next few months, she would go on dates, but she would tell me about them and tell me how much better I was than them. I continued to not date because I was a sap in love with her, but I had told her if she found someone she wanted to pursue, I would end our relationship and she could go after him. But then, after talking to my friends and family, I had a realization that I was doing all this for her when she wasn't even my girlfriend anymore. So I told her and she agreed that any physical relationship would end until we got back to being exclusive. Except it didn't. We would go on dates and she would guilt me, pressure me, and I would give in. She would then immediately afterwards become angry, saying, "Why couldn't you resist? Why didn't I stop her?" She became very abusive and hurtful. The worst was when she told me that if she got pregnant, she would never tell me and only she would decide what to do then. That hurt so much, as I've wanted to be a father and would never leave my children alone. but I would simply fight with her and we'd end up making up. During all of this, we would continue to talk about a future together. She would see a mixed baby, I'm Latino and she was white, and say how she saw the cutest baby that could have been our baby. Whenever she was depressed, she would call me or ask me, "Would you still marry me?" And I would respond, "Of course I would. I love you." It wasn't until Christmas when I was in Florida visiting my brother that I began to suspect something more was up. I'd text her. She wouldn't respond. I'd call her to do the phone thing at night, but she wouldn't answer. But one time, she called and asked if I had a specific movie on DVD, and when I asked why, she said, "I wanted to watch it with my family." But I could sense something was off. When I came back from vacation and started the new semester of school, she came to visit me. Sort of. She came to my university for some reason and lost her Fitbit and called me to help her. I came to help and we spent some time together, but I could feel something was different. She then told me she wanted me to come visit her in 2 days at her parents' house as she had something to talk to me about. It was then I knew what was coming. I talked to some of my friends and prepared for the worst. When I got to her parents' house, it was late. She asked me to come at 10 p.m. She came into my car and we talked for about 30 minutes to an hour. She told me that she no longer wanted to date me, and I agreed. I told her I had felt her becoming distant, and I asked her if it was someone else. She denied there was something else. She said she simply no longer felt we were right for each other. But then she said other things. She said that she never considered me husband material, that she never saw us getting married, having kids, that she had always known from the beginning. She even said another reason she didn't want to be with me was that her kids would look like her because of her being white and me being Latino. This is especially funny now because she likes to say how progressive and not racist she is. Right. This shocked me. I remembered back to all the plans we made, all the times she asked if I would marry her, all the times she had talked about our hypothetical children. That hurt the most. I told her I loved her, but that I agreed we were done. We decided on no contact. She decided to block me on Facebook, saying she knew if I blocked her, I wouldn't be able to keep her blocked, so she would be the one to do it. I said fine. We didn't end up blocking each other on our phones in case of an emergency. I had no family in state. As I drove away, I felt sad, but also felt as if a huge burden was lifted from me. For the next month, it was an uphill battle. I would be depressed at night. I realized she had made me codependent on her. I had become accustomed to her nightly phone calls. I felt very alone. There were many nights on the floor of my room in tear-filled agony, but I threw myself into my work, my school, and my friends. But then, about a month later, I got a call from her early in the morning. I answered thinking it was an emergency. It wasn't. It seemed as if she had butt dialed me, but that didn't make sense. We hadn't spoken in a month. What were the chances of her accidentally calling me? I could hear a conversation, but only bits and pieces. I could hear her voice, but also a voice I didn't recognize. It was definitely a guy. I heard something about snow, and I swear I heard my name mentioned, but then the call ended. I know I shouldn't have, but I reached out to a few friends and heard she had started dating someone. I then reached out to her. I know I shouldn't have, and asked if she was alright. It took a few days for her to respond. She then said she had butt dialed me, but she had wanted to speak to me. She said she really missed my friendship, and for a few minutes, we spoke as if nothing had changed. She told me she had started seeing someone. I told her I had heard, and she asked how, and I told her from friends. But then I had seen a picture of the guy. She began talking about him and about his flaws. I just listened, but I began to feel weird about it. She then spoke about his hair being weird, and I responded, yeah, it is a bit. But I guess she had been speaking about his hair years ago, and then began to question how I knew what his hair looked like back then. I responded, sorry, I thought you were talking about now. She then told me that she had recently been getting a lot of random friend requests on Facebook, and she asked if they were me. They weren't. We ended the conversation shortly after, and I began to have a weird feeling about it. I was sort of happy for her, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to continue talking to her. I messaged her the next day and said that, while I enjoyed talking to you like we used to, I don't think we should speak again. She agreed. I then proceeded to block her number. A week later, while on campus, I noticed I had a voicemail, even though my phone hadn't rang. It was from her asking if I was home. She came to drop some things off. I personally felt like there wasn't anything worth her returning, and it pissed me off that she had come and dropped the stuff off at my front door since no one was home. I became really annoyed. I had told her no contact anymore. I then decided to write her an email. I told her basically that I had loved her with all my heart, but that she had mistreated me in a lot of ways, lied to me, etc. I told her to thank her parents for being kind to me. We had a rather good relationship, and they actively told me how amazing a boyfriend I was. I then proceeded to tell her I want no contact of any kind, that she was now blocked from my phone. I said though we live about an hour away now, it would be possible to run into each other due to friends living close to me and such. I told her, the way you treat me is how I will treat you if we see each other. If you treat me like a friend, I'll treat you like a friend. If you treat me like an enemy, I'll treat you like an enemy. If you treat me like I don't exist, I'll treat you like you don't exist. I sent the email and didn't expect to ever hear back from her. Boy, was I wrong. A few days later, I received a reply. From her dad. Her dad, mind you, is an ex-Marine and a lawyer. In his email, he stated that I should leave his daughter alone. He accused me of stalking her, not sure how I was, seeing as I was an hour away and busy with school, work, and friends. He accused me of creating fake Facebook accounts and cyber stalking her. Once again, I didn't create any to do that. Though I had looked at her account from a friend's account a few times, but that was it. I mean, who hasn't? But then he used the line about treating her the way she treats me, and he highlighted that part and said, I consider this a threat. He proceeded to tell me to leave her alone, otherwise he would get a restraining order. I was blown away. Her dad and I had always been on good terms. I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I spoke to a few people, and having studied a bit of law in university, responded to him. I told him, look, I want nothing to do with your daughter. She was the one who reinitiated contact. In fact, she came to my house without my knowledge a week ago. If I'm a stalker, why would she risk coming to my house? I told him that we both know what he had said was unsubstantiated and no judge would ever give them a restraining order. I told him never contact me again, and I'll do the same to him and his daughter. It was then that I wondered what the is going on. What stories was she telling people about me? What sob tale is she spinning and why? I told some of my friends about what happened, and they were blown away too. They just told me that I dodged a nuke, and I should be happy. I thought the story would end there, but like I said, this is a cheating story. A long one, but a cheating story nonetheless. So we had broken up in January. Just after the first week of April, a friend of mine messaged me while I was working and told me that my ex had just gotten engaged. I was floored. It had only been 3 months. For the girl that had constantly said how hard relationships had been for her because of her cheating, abusive ex-fiancé, it just didn't make sense. But what was interesting, my friend told me, was a comment that someone had put on her announcement. This person was congratulating her on her engagement and so happy she could help them get together back in November. November. The same November when we were still going out. Yes, weren't exclusive at that point, but to me, since I had given her several outs and she lied about there being someone else, I consider that cheating. I was livid. And then everything came into place. That's why she became distant at Christmas. That's who she wanted to watch the movies with. That hurt, but I got on with my life. I was still having depression issues, trust issues. I spoke about it to some people, friends, church people, but the more I spoke about it, the more I learned about her. People who had known her and didn't know we had dated came out and said, yeah, that girl had issues. They told me things they probably shouldn't have told me, but whatever. I found out all the nasty things she said about other people, and I began to realize that she never really cared about me. She simply wanted someone to care for her and then dump once someone better came along. I realized that the reason I fell in love with her was not because of who she was, but what she pretended to be. She had heard about me, knew I was a nice guy, and decided I was empathetic enough to trick. She simply reflected myself back at me, and I thought I was dating someone similar to me, but really I had been dating a narcissist. But this helped me understand a lot about myself, that I care too much, love too deeply, and I need to be careful who I give my love to. Lesson learned. So half a year passed. I hadn't run into her, but I had heard she had moved back to my city with her husband. So much for me being a stalker. Some of my friends had a few run-ins with her, and one embarrassed her by making a sexual innuendo about something she had done. I got invited to a friend's wedding. I couldn't make it to the actual ceremony, but I made it to the reception. I was just finishing writing a small speech to make fun of my friend. Dude had a laugh that was so annoying and loud, you wouldn't believe. I was ending my remarks and was about to sit down when a mutual friend started walking into the room. And who was right behind her? My ex and her husband. I saw her and was a bit surprised. Just as she was about to walk into the room, our eyes met. And in the moment, instead of walking into the room, she pushed her husband back into the hallway out of sight and quickly followed. I was taken back and stepped out to the other side of the building to collect my thoughts and feelings. I was overall fine, but the shock of seeing her was interesting. After a few minutes, I came back into the room and noticed my ex and her husband had never entered the room. I then asked my friend if he invited her, and he said yes. I told him a heads up would have been nice, but he said that he didn't even think about it. He wasn't that close of a friend, more of a mutual friend of one of my best friends. Anyway, minutes passed, and the new couple was about to have their first dance, so we all moved some chairs out of the way. I happened to be on the side of a door when my ex came through, saw I was right next to her, and ran to the other side of the room with her husband being towed behind her. We avoided each other the rest of the reception, except for a couple of glances, but in that moment, I felt whole again. All those months after the breakup, I felt broken and like a piece of myself was missing, but in this moment, seeing how she reacted, how ashamed she seemed to be, I felt my power coming back. I felt truly happy for the first time. Even though she was married and I was not, I had won the breakup. She was ashamed to even look at me. I had no such problems. I had an overall clear conscience. And now here I am, over 4 years after the breakup, writing this. I'm still single, but overall I'm happy. And Maddie, if you ended up reading this, you. I'm the one who ended up finishing university, and you're just a housewife. After all that talk about changing the world, all you're ever going to change are dirty diapers and be a fucking liar and cheater.
Are you all my personal dreams?
Destroy my childhood, ruin my chance at college, and laugh when I said I was homeless? Ha, cool. I'll ruin your life. Backstory. My mother was a really person. I have 4 other siblings, 1 older sister, 3 way younger, 3 different dads. Before I was born, I'm a male by the way, my oldest sister was taken away from my mother when she was a few months old because she tried to slice the father of my sister while he was holding her. She lost custody and the dude left her. Older sister goes to live with her father's family in a different city. Cue little old me coming into the sexy world. My dad went to jail 2 to 3 years after I was born for a while. I rarely saw him. He's an alcoholic, if that matters. She was a single mother, but she made it work, and she worked hard. One of the bigger problems was that she took out all her aggression and hatred of my father on me, as well as work stress and etc. She dealt with sexual abuse growing up, which I'm sure definitely affected her relationships and how she treated me as well. Anyways, cue me being abused from the ages of 4 to 5 to about 17. Every day was hell. She was extremely strict, and her perspective was warped. She was also pretty big in stature and had a lot of strength. Examples of her being: I've gotten beat up badly once because her room was dirty. The dishes weren't washed, and I got beaten soon as I got home, even if there weren't dishes when I left for school. If I walked too loud, I'd get my ass beat. She broke my nose for looking at her the wrong way on my 10th birthday when she brought me a cake I was allergic to. It had peanuts. She knows I'm slightly allergic, but feigned ignorance. It was more or less every day or every other day. She used her fists, elbows, extension cords, hangers, chairs, canes, bats, etc. Whatever she could find, I was getting beaten with. I couldn't even escape to my room for long because she would always call me every few minutes to get her things or to yell at me. She never drank or did drugs or anything. Whenever she was upset, I happened to be in front of her and she'd kick me down the stairs to make me hurry up. She's put a knife to my neck before and had to be forcibly stopped by her boyfriend at the time. Burned my Christmas presents from other people. She didn't get me anything that year. And just other really things. The only thing I will say, she tried really hard to make up for it with video games and electronics and etc. It didn't make a difference to me though. It never helped. She controlled most of my aspects of my life. I got by with little petty revenges, peeing in the Lipton iced tea she drank, rubbing her forks and spoons between my butt cheeks before I served her dinner, ignoring her screams for help when she had kidney stones. How the f*** am I supposed to help anyways? But by the time I got to high school, I turned to alcohol. I resented her, and the negative atmosphere affected who I was as a person. I started to be cold and uncaring, calculated. She started kicking me out every few months, telling me to find somewhere else to live by age 15. She sent me away to a different country for a year and tried to keep my passport, but I made it back to the US with the help of the embassy and my stepfather. She'd already left by that time and found some other dude. I came back senior year with no credits for the prior grade, which ended with me getting a GED. I spent most of the time I could with my best friend and started working jobs. I was terrible at saving as I had accumulated loads of habits while growing up, so it didn't make much difference. She eventually told me that if I went to college, I would always have a place to live until I finished. Cue my first 2 semesters at a 2-year college. I maintained a 3.7-ish GPA. My teachers loved me, and it was my escape. Towards the end of my second semester during finals, I came home late one night around 10 p.m., and my mother yanks the door open, screaming in my face, asking when I'll move out. I'm slightly drunk and decide to completely ignore her and walk to my room. If I opened my mouth, that day would be the day I blew up and cursed her out. I've rarely ever raised my voice at her because it never ended well. Now at this point, I'm 19 and I've been doing school full-time with no savings. I'm also fairly fit and could easily take my mom at this point. Never laid a hand on her or any woman. I hate violence. I get to my room, she rips my door open and starts yelling. I say nothing and stare at her. She walks away and called the police on me, saying she thought I'd murder her and my younger siblings. I don't know where the she got that idea from, as she's the one who's nearly killed me many times. I packed everything into a duffel bag and left 5 minutes afterwards. I failed all of my finals because I couldn't make it to my school. Things kind of spiraled, and the next 2 to 3 years were me on and off homeless. I survived the best I could in a big city with no college degree and made a lot of choices due to my habits. Eventually, I found a profitable hobby that gave me meaning, and through that, I started to work my way up. Got my own apartment, had a full-time job, and did my hobby on the side. I hadn't kept up contact with my mother at all, but my younger sister, who was old enough to have a phone, found me on social media, so I saw photos and such. She didn't have it anywhere near as bad, but she did get beaten occasionally. My mother reached out via email, all smiles, asking how I've been. Now guys, I've always been envious of the relationship most people have with their moms, so I gave her a chance and gave her a call. We talked for a few minutes and everything was civil and seemed like things would go okay. But then, she asked me what I've been up to the last few years, and I told her honestly that I was homeless for a while and struggled a lot after what she did to me, but I worked my way out of it. She literally laughs. She laughed for a few seconds in a very condescending kind of chuckle and then said, "I never did a thing to you, so you don't know what abuse is. It's your own damn fault you were homeless. So how about you?" But by that point, I hung up. I was speechless and fuming. I don't know what abuse is? Okay, I've spent too long letting you destroy my sanity. Now is the time. There were a few things my mother didn't know. One, I knew for a fact that the current well-paying job she had was gotten on lies, as she never got her college degree and lied about it on her resume. Two, I had access to all of her email accounts and cloud storage accounts since I was the one that set them up when I was younger, and she never changes her passwords. Lastly, she definitely wasn't aware that from 13 years old on to the last time she hit me, I took photos of all my bruises, marks, wounds, bloody noses, saving them to my computer and then Google Drive. On top of that, my little sister had been sending me photos via social media of the bruises she got from my mom. The first thing I did was compile all of those photos, videos into one folder. I then reached out to CPS in my city and explained that my siblings were being abused, how I was abused in the past, and that I had mountains of proof. Since I've called the cops on my mother before, and the thing that happened with my older sister, there was immediately a home visit. They arrived almost a day later with the police, and coincidentally, my mother was literally in the process of beating my younger sister when they were knocking. Cue an emergency removal of all my siblings from the house, and my mother getting arrested, though she was released hours later. I was getting a day-to-day play-by-play because my mother's best friend is a blabbermouth, and everything my mother said, she told her son, who related to me without either of their knowledge. I sent CPS all the evidence, and there's a legit case against my mother now. The next day, I emailed and then called up her job to inform them that she had lied about having a very necessary college degree, as well as current events in her life, which sparked a background check. She was fired days later. Say adios to $75K and a blacklist in the only industry you know how to work. I then spitefully deleted every cloud account and email address I ever made for her, which I'm sure will be keeping up with a lot of bills and etc. nearly impossible. I then anonymously reported her to the IRS because of the tax fraud she committed for years by claiming people's children that weren't hers, with a lot of detailed information since I lived with her while she did it. So now, my mother lost all her kids and her job. I'm meeting with a caseworker from CPS next week to talk more about what happens moving forward, but I do know they're not going back. I don't know how she's going to pay her mortgage now and survive. I'm sure she's going to get a call from the IRS, who will be looking for a few $1,000s she owes them. She also has to go back to court in a few months. Not exactly sure what she was charged with, but I'll update when I find out how everything turns out. Side note, she isn't aware I'm the cause of any of this. I plan on keeping tabs on her and waiting until it seems like she's close to death before I tell her it was all me and I peed in her Lipton. Update. I swallowed my pride and moved into a homeless shelter in my city specifically for people with jobs and savings. I'll be able to continue saving while I work on bettering myself as a person. I created an action plan and mapped out all of my goals and how I want to achieve them. Up until recently, I wasn't even planning on being alive. Sorry if that's too dark. I honestly always had these thoughts wishing my mother would have finished the job with me and made life easier. But as of late, I'm becoming more and more curious of what I'm capable of if I gave myself the chance. I've been able to visit my younger siblings and I've gotten to know my little sis a bit better because of the experience. I feel like a horrible person for admitting I still feel nothing for them or really anyone, but I won't let my feelings get in the way of the promise I made to myself or them. I've also only drank 3 times in the last 4 months compared to every other day in the past, which isn't great, but it's a change. My younger siblings are still with CPS, but I can't go into detail. My mother was supposed to go to a hearing to get them back, but things got complicated. Important. My mother's best friend's son, who I've known for 8 years, does his best to relay all the my mother tells her while they talk on the phone all day. Things had gotten worse for her. She hasn't been keeping up with her mortgage payments. Her fiancé, my youngest sibling's dad, is no longer her fiancé anymore and trying to file for custody. I heard she was a wreck, then went ghost, but it didn't make me feel better. There weren't supposed to be any winners. Honestly, I wasn't even going to update. I initially just wanted to tell someone for once, but one thing changed my mind. Something I was not expecting months after I set this all in motion. A phone call from my mother. In the past, seeing her calls, even after moving out, would set me on edge, but that hasn't been the case lately. It was just another thing that happened. Just another event. Meaningless, but at the same time, she always had my number, but never reached out. Even when things first started going to shit, I doubt she even gave me a second thought, but I'm sure you're all curious to know what she said. My mother is gone. A few weeks after my post, the state I'm in brought felony charges up against her. She left the country shortly after and went to her home country in South America. I have no idea how she was even allowed to leave, but they didn't take her passport. She avoided specifics on that part. She mentioned staying with a family friend temporarily and tried to frame it as a short vacation. She didn't even start off with a hello. She started the conversation by ordering me to go somewhere quiet before launching into a sob story about how things have been going for her. This is after months of no contact. After laughing at me for being homeless and denying she ever abused me months ago, just yammering away like it was nothing, but I let her talk. It was surreal. I felt so cold just listening to her talk. It was like talking to a stranger. She mentions losing out on so much money and how she doesn't know how it all happened, and then finally she hits the topic du jour. Cue her bringing up my little sister and the night of the emergency removal. She starts complaining about how she misses my little sister and brothers, mentions something about how it messes up tax season, and then she had the audacity to start trying to convince me that I should go talk to the caseworkers for her to back up her claim that she never abused them or me and I should know that. She said that to me. After everything, of all people, 9 minutes into the conversation, like nothing ever happened, but it wasn't anything new. Of course I cut her off, but at that point, my mind was already made up. I asked her if she remembered when I used to make iced tea for her all those years. She was a little thrown off, but said, yes. I paused for a few seconds before slowly telling her in detail about all the ways I sabotaged her Lipton iced tea. She tried to interrupt me once, but I didn't stop talking. I told her about how I'd always put too much sugar and she'd never taste it and keep drinking more, which was why I always insisted. There was just silence on the phone, but I know she was listening. I told her I'd wait until after dinner when I got home from school to shower so I could rub her spoons between my butt cheeks for maximum damage and how I'd mix it into her food to mask it. At this point, I'm not even sure she's listening anymore, but I'm still describing specific days I remember doing it that I know she would remember. She finally loudly interrupts me, screaming at me disgusting evil things. She cursed me the way she used to back in the days when she'd be standing over me with an extension cord beating the skin off of me when I was younger. She's blaming me for ruining her life and how she wishes she had a better child, all without knowing that I directly caused the destruction of her current life, though she's speaking about the past. I just let her waste her breath. She couldn't touch me or my siblings. It only lasted a few seconds. Now I remember spending years daydreaming of all the things I'd say to my mother if I had the chance, but I just bottled it up with all my other baggage and kept trying to exist. A lot of people from my original post also gave me some ideas. When she finally shut her mouth, I calmly told her, "Look, Mom, you don't know what abuse is, and honestly, it's your own fault this is all happening to you. Also, my bad for pissing in your iced tea." Then I just hung up the phone and blocked her number. That was the last day I drank. I haven't talked to her since. I'm not sure she's aware, or maybe she is, how bad of an idea it was to leave the country with all this going down, even if it was for a few weeks. At this point, I'm done with her. I don't want an apology. I just want to move forward and be a better person. I know that's hard to believe after everything I just told you, but it's the truth. I try my best to put as much positivity into the world and share it with the people around me as much as possible. But her. I don't know if she knows it was me, but I didn't tell her. I'm sure she can guess though if she really tried. Anyways, that's my revenge. I'm still actively her life up, but I'm not taking any active part in it. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish I had a real family that loved me and I knew how to love back the right way. Final update. My aunt and I recently reconnected about 2 months ago. Prior to last month, I haven't seen her in years. We met up and had a long conversation about life and everything, and then she admitted that she talks to my mother nearly every day. She had mentioned all the things happening to my mother, but didn't know it was me who started this all. She actually felt really bad for my mother, but my aunt was always a really caring person, so I understand, I guess. I told her I was very uncomfortable with the thought of her talking to me about my mother and asked her not to. My aunt did it anyway. After meeting up with my aunt, I learned through her that my mother was finally coming back to America. She was arriving at the airport in 1 week. The problem was my aunt told her that I was going with her so the three of us could all talk without telling me. I didn't know what the feeling of betrayal really felt like until my aunt told me that. To be honest, as wrong as it sounds, I'd rather my mother just think I died or something. But my aunt kept insisting that I had to give my mother another chance and I had to learn to be open-minded, and that though she wasn't there all the times my mom did horrible to me, she loved us both and wanted us to get along. Like I'm supposed to just get along with someone who has tried to murder me? Like my mother has choked me awake for school? If you don't know what it's like to forcefully wake up not being able to breathe and seeing your own mother standing over you at 5 a.m. angrily and tightly gripping your throat, count yourself lucky. But, as I said at the beginning of this post, I've already resolved myself to being a bad person, and so I lied to one of the only people who was kind to me, and I promised my aunt I'd try to have a heart-to-heart with my mom and her and talk out the nearly 20 years of abuse. Obviously, that was not happening. When we got off the phone, I called the detectives who gave me their number months back in case I heard from my mother. I asked them a few leading questions about what would happen if so and so were discovered, and then I made my plan. I wasn't sure if my mother would make it past customs. How was she able to travel to a different country with a warrant? I didn't know. But if she did, I'd call the police in the bathroom and wait for them to arrive while I sat with my mother. Cue my mother making it past customs because she's my mother. She's a horrible person, but she's good at what she does, which is being horrible. I digress. My mother calls my aunt when she's getting off the plane, and my aunt says she's going to meet her. I told my aunt I'd wait for them in the little Starbucks, and then we'd all drive somewhere else. My aunt agreed and went off. I called a detective and told him that my mother was standing a few feet away from me, and if they could meet me at our destination, we were going to. They told me that was unnecessary and that they'd have officers closer to me come and apprehend her at the airport instead. And so I waited and waited. And then I finally saw them arriving both at the same time. The 3 to 4 officers who had convened in those few passing minutes and actively searching around the food court I sat close to. My mother and my aunt walked down the gate towards me. I felt this overwhelming weight in my chest just kind of settling down deeper and deeper into my gut the closer they got and the more the officers searched. What if they stopped looking when my mother arrived? What if my mother somehow got away with this again? Countless thoughts, but I just bit them back. I've grown very talented at silencing whatever my inner turmoil of the day happens to be. But my mother and my aunt were animatedly talking as they made their way to where I was sitting. Before they had a chance to say anything, I quickly jumped up and said, "I ordered some teas. Let me go see if they're ready," which was the first thing I could think of as they were sitting, but it worked, and I dashed off past the cash register to the Starbucks and to the outer part of the food court. Looking back, saying I had to go grab some tea probably wasn't the best thing to say, but I digress. I made it a few feet out the door and half jogged over to the officers who were still looking around the food court area. From where they were, they wouldn't have seen us sitting. I walked over and asked them if they had gotten a call about a woman who had a warrant or something. I mentioned that the detectives said officers in or near the airport would arrest her. They said they did, and I told them it was my mother. I told them her first name, and they verified her last name. I told them she was sitting right in the Starbucks waiting for jail, and one of the cops chuckled. Seemed a bit surprised and judgy that I was pointing them right to my mom. I told them I'd go make sure she didn't leave, and they followed behind like 10 to 15 paces. I half jogged back inside and up to the little table where they were sitting. My mother had that half scowl she always wore whenever she looked up at me when I popped out of nowhere, and my aunt began asking me where the drinks were before I cut her off and looked dead at my mother and her scowling face, which had quickly changed into confusion when I had finished my sentence. Mom, I know we don't get along, but I wanted to let you know it's all my fault. Cue my mother starting to ask me with this kind of motherly voice, what do you mean it's your fault? Why did you But of course I cut her off, because there's nothing she hates more than being cut off, and I finally have the power in this situation. Look, I want you to know exactly whose fault it is, and whose piss you drank when you're sitting in jail, wondering why the world did you so wrong. She sputtered something and slapped the out of me. My aunt's jaw dropped. People are watching. The cops saw it happen as well, as only a few seconds had passed from when I walked in. Into handcuffs she goes. Now she's showing her true colors, cursing and saying all kinds of things you couldn't imagine a mom saying to her kid, telling me she'd kill me and so on, etc. I calmly walked behind them as long as I could until they took her to some room and held her until the detective arrived. I wasn't there that long though, as the lack of thrill of it all kind of got to me, and I went home to break a 2-month sober streak. I was there long enough for my aunt to tell me she was disappointed in me and that she doesn't know if she can forgive me for doing something so spiteful and disgusting to her sister. To be fair, I did it completely out of spite, so she isn't wrong. I've already acknowledged I'm not a good person for what I did. Come to find out, my mother was using my aunt's passport to leave and come back to the country multiple times since she left. That's why they never caught her. Now my aunt has some explaining to do, but I wish she didn't have to get caught up in all this. She has always been kind to me and doesn't deserve it. My mother is facing up to 10 years just for using my aunt's passport alone and a slew of other charges, including one for child endangerment. Her husband left her. Her kids were taken from her. Her friends have seemingly distanced themselves from her from what I know. After 19 years of abuse, I finally get my revenge, and none of the charges have anything to do with me, which is interesting. Did it feel good? No. I felt nothing. Just the rise and fall of the situation, but nothing really concrete. I expected to feel something. Not even satisfaction or happiness, but something. Either way, the only thing for me to do is continue to work towards becoming the person I want to be. She told me constantly that I was worthless and that I'm nothing. I've told myself the same consistently as well in the past. I've decided I'm going to become one of the greatest photographers of my time, and I'm going to push myself as hard as possible to succeed so that anyone else who has ever suffered how I have now have no reason to doubt themselves or their ability to be great one day. As for me right now, I currently live in a homeless shelter. I decided to go to one 6 months ago after realizing all the drinking and inconsistency was making it hard for me to move forward. I wasn't saving any money, and I was couch hopping from friend's house to friend's house. A few weeks ago, I got a voucher from the government, and sometime in the next 2 months, I can find a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment. I've been aggressively saving my small checks. I've been practicing and working on building better habits and just being a better photographer. I don't make much right now, and I know many people will say it's a stupid dream, but I know if I put all my effort into making this work, I can not only be a self-sustaining photographer, but more than that. My situation is embarrassing, and it's hard, but I know I won't be here longer than another few months. It's not some dream, it's a plan. I'll also be going back to school in the fall and pursuing photography. As for my siblings, the situation is still a bit dicey, and I don't think I'll give an update about that, but they're all doing very well. As far as my mother is concerned, as horrible as she was towards me, the only part of me that even thinks about her on rare occasions hopes she isn't having a horrible time. I don't like knowing people are hurting.